The radio crackled through the storm. "Mayday, Mayday. SEAL Team Delta requesting immediate extraction." Rain lashed sideways across the mountain valley. Lightning split the black sky, illuminating muzzle flashes like deadly fireflies. The acrid smell of gunpowder mixed with pine and wet earth as concrete exploded around trapped operators. Commander Richards pressed against shattered rock, his team pinned down by machine gun fire from 3 directions. Blood streaked his face. His voice broke through static. "We're taking heavy casualties. Ammunition critical. Enemy has us surrounded." Then crack. A single rifle shot pierced the storm. An enemy sniper dropped from a rocky outcrop 200 meters away. The SEALs looked at each other in confusion. Who was shooting from within the tempest? 3 hours earlier, Staff Sergeant Maria Santos wiped condensation from her scope for the 100th time that morning. The forward operating base perched on cliffs overlooking the turbulent valley, where Blackhawks struggled against growing winds. To everyone else, she was just logistic support, a quiet woman who processed ammunition requests and maintained inventory spreadsheets. They called her Sniper Girl with barely concealed mockery, not because she was respected, but because she insisted on carrying that oversized CHATAC M200 rifle everywhere. Her quarters were spartanly furnished, a narrow cot, a metal desk, and most importantly, a notebook filled with wind speed calculations and atmosphere pressure readings. While other soldiers socialized in the mess hall, Maria studied ballistics charts by lamplight. The CHATAC leaned against her wall like a faithful companion. Its 31 pounds felt weightless in her hands after 3 years of obsessive practice. She'd earned the nickname Ace of Spades during advanced marksmanship training, a 2,200-meter shot that instructors still discussed in hushed tones, but that was classified. Here, she was invisible. Through her window, she watched SEAL Team Delta preparing for their mountain sweep operation. Commander Richards briefed his 12-man team with characteristic confidence. They were America's elite, seasoned warriors who'd seen action from Afghanistan to Syria. They barely acknowledged her existence. "Morning, Sniper Girl," one operator called mockingly as he passed her supply window. "Got any pencils that shoot straight?" His teammates chuckled. Maria handed him the requisitioned ammunition without comment, her dark eyes revealing nothing. She'd learned long ago that respect wasn't given. It was earned through actions, not words. The weather briefing crackled over base communications. Mountain storm intensifying, winds gusting to 70 knots, visibility near zero, all non-essential operations postponed. Essential operations, however, continued. Intelligence indicated high-value targets moving through the valley sector 12 kilometers north. Despite deteriorating conditions, SEAL Team Delta would proceed as planned. Maria checked her equipment one final time. The CHATAC scope was perfectly calibrated. Her ghillie suit hung ready. Most importantly, her range cards were updated with current atmospheric data. She wasn't assigned to this mission. Her presence wasn't requested or expected, but something deep in her warrior's instinct whispered warnings about this operation. The storm was worsening. SEAL teams were elite, but they were human. And humans made mistakes when visibility dropped to zero and wind played tricks with sound. As snow began hammering the base's tin roofs, Maria made a decision that would change everything. She slung the CHATAC across her shoulders and slipped out through the maintenance exit. Nobody noticed the logistics specialist disappearing into the tempest. The mountain sector lay 12 kilometers through treacherous alpine terrain. While SEAL Team Delta traveled by armored vehicle along the main route, Maria took the high ground, a parallel ridge that would provide overwatch positions for their operational area. Her boots found purchase on ice-slicked rocks. The CHATAC's weight distributed perfectly across her frame through years of conditioning. Lightning illuminated her path in stroboscopic flashes, but she moved with the confidence of someone who'd walked these hills 100 times in imagination. By the time the SEALs reached their objective, Maria had positioned herself on a collapsed communications tower 900 meters away. Through her scope, she could see everything. The team's approach routes, potential ambush positions, and most critically, the muzzle flashes that began erupting from concealed enemy positions. The trap was perfectly laid. SEAL Team Delta was walking into a killing field. The mountain sector resembled a war-torn moonscape. Abandoned mining facilities stretched like broken teeth against the storm-darkened sky. Rusted equipment created perfect hiding spots for patient enemies. Snow mixed with smoke, creating a toxic fog that burned eyes and throats. SEAL Team Delta moved in perfect formation through the maze of concrete and steel. Their night vision cut through darkness, weapons tracking smoothly across potential threat vectors. These were America's finest. Warriors trained for exactly these conditions. Commander Richards hand-signaled the team into position. Target buildings loomed ahead. 3 warehouse structures where intelligence suggested enemy commanders were coordinating attacks against coalition forces. The first RPG streaked from Building 2 like a comet. The explosion shattered concrete 20 feet from Petty Officer Martinez, sending razor-sharp fragments slicing through his left arm. He rolled behind cover, blood streaming as machine gun fire erupted from 3 separate positions simultaneously. Contact! Contact! Multiple enemy positions. Richards shouted into his radio. "We've got heavy resistance." The SEALs had walked into a perfectly orchestrated ambush. Enemy fighters occupied elevated positions in all 3 buildings, creating interlocking fields of fire that turned the central courtyard into a death trap. Another RPG screamed overhead, detonating against a concrete pillar. The shockwave knocked Seaman Johnson flat, his rifle skittering across snow-covered pavement. Enemy snipers began picking off his team with methodical precision. "Building 1. Sniper in Building 1, shouted Chief Petty Officer Davis, pressing himself against twisted metal as bullets sparked around his position. "I can't get an angle." Richards tried coordinating suppressive fire, but the storm was interfering with communications. Radio static swallowed his commands. Wind howled through broken structures, masking enemy movements. Lightning flashes created disorienting, stroboscopic effects that made targeting nearly impossible. The SEALs were trapped. Petty Officer Thompson caught shrapnel in his leg from a 3rd RPG strike. His scream pierced through gunfire and thunder. Blood pooled beneath him as he tried maintaining pressure on the wound. "We need immediate extraction." Richards pressed the radio against his mouth, shouting over chaos. "SEAL Team Delta is taking heavy casualties. We're pinned down and running low on ammunition." Machine gun fire chewed through concrete around their positions. Muzzle flashes winked like deadly stars from windows above. The enemy had prepared this killing ground perfectly. Overlapping fields of fire, multiple escape routes, and elevated positions that negated the SEALs' tactical advantages. 900 meters away, Staff Sergeant Maria Santos adjusted her scope's elevation for the shifting wind. The Chaytak M200 remained steady despite snow hammering her position on top the collapsed communications tower. Through her optics, she watched the SEAL team's desperate situation unfold with crystal clarity. Her ghillie suit blended perfectly with debris and twisted metal. Years of solitary practice had taught her to become invisible, to breathe with the rhythm of battle, to read wind patterns that others couldn't detect. While the storm blinded everyone else, Maria saw everything. The enemy sniper in Building 1 was her first target. He'd been systematically picking off the SEALs, his position perfectly concealed behind a concrete barricade. But Maria had mapped every possible shooting position during her reconnaissance. She knew exactly where he was hiding. Her finger caressed the trigger. Breathe in. Calculate wind drift. Account for atmospheric pressure. Let her heartbeat steady. The Chaytak's massive report cut through thunder like the voice of God. The 408 Chaytak bullet traveled at 3,000 feet per second, covering the distance in less than a second. The enemy sniper's rifle tumbled from his grasp as he collapsed behind the barricade. Below, the SEALs looked around in confusion. Where had that shot come from? But Maria was already tracking her second target. The RPG team repositioning in Building 2. They were setting up for a kill shot on Commander Richards' position. She had maybe 10 seconds before they fired. The rocket gunner spun backward, his RPG launcher clattering down concrete stairs. His loader scrambled for cover, abandoning the weapon system that would have ended the SEAL's resistance. Richards pressed his radio. Unknown sniper. Identify yourself. Maria didn't respond. She was busy acquiring the machine gun nest in Building 3 that was raking the courtyard with deadly precision. The gunner was well protected behind steel plating, but Maria had studied these buildings for months. She knew about the gap in his protection, a 6-inch window where his shoulder was exposed when he swiveled left. She waited with infinite patience. Breathe. Calculate. The machine gunner turned toward the SEAL's position. The heavy machine gun fell silent. From her elevated position, Maria could see the entire battlefield like a chess master viewing the board. Enemy fighters were scrambling, trying to understand why their carefully planned ambush was collapsing. Their tactical communications erupted in confusion and fear. A fourth enemy sniper revealed his position by firing at Chief Davis. Muzzle flash bloomed from a window in Building 1. Different floor, different angle. Maria's crosshairs found him before his rifle stopped smoking. The Chaitak's thunderous voice spoke again. Another threat eliminated, but more enemies were moving. A squad of fighters was advancing through Building 2's ground floor, trying to flank the SEAL's position. Maria tracked their movement through broken windows, selecting targets with surgical precision. Crack, crack, crack. Each shot was perfect. Each target dropped. The Chaitak's magazine held 7 rounds, and she was making each one count with devastating efficiency. The SEALs below began moving with renewed confidence. They could hear enemy fighters shouting in panic, their coordinated attack dissolving into chaos. Commander Richards seized the initiative, ordering his team to advance toward better cover. Move, 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 he commanded. Whatever's out there's giving us covering fire. The storm was actually helping her. Wind patterns carried sound unpredictably, making it impossible for enemies to locate her position. Lightning flashes masked her muzzle flash. Snow washed away the acrid smell of burnt powder. She was a ghost in the tempest. Maria reloaded with practice speed. 20 seconds to seat a fresh magazine, cycle the bolt, and resume targeting. Enemy fighters were retreating now, but several were still in position to inflict casualties. A group of insurgents tried establishing a new machine gun position on Building 2's roof. They hauled their weapon up external stairs, thinking elevation would provide safety. They were wrong. Through her scope, Maria watched them setting up the heavy gun. The assistant gunner was adjusting the bipod legs when her bullet found him. The gunner tried to complete the setup alone, but Maria's second shot ended that effort. Building 3 still held resistance. Maria counted at least 6 fighters maintaining defensive positions. They were better disciplined than the others, probably experienced veterans who wouldn't panic easily. But they made a critical mistake. They tried coordinating a counterattack. As they moved between rooms to establish new firing positions, they exposed themselves to Maria's overwatch. She tracked them through broken windows and doorways, her crosshairs following with mechanical precision. The squad leader dropped in a second-floor corridor. His radio man crumpled near a stairwell. The remaining fighters abandoned their positions, fleeing through rear exits into the storm. Below in the courtyard, SEAL Team Delta was regrouping. Wounded teammates were receiving medical attention. Commander Richards was trying to establish radio contact with their mysterious guardian angel. Unknown sniper, this is SEAL Team Delta Actual. Please identify yourself. We owe you our lives. Maria smiled grimly as she began packing her equipment. The Chaitak broke down into component parts that fit into her tactical bag. Spent brass went into a separate pouch. No evidence left behind. She'd fired 16 rounds. 16 enemies eliminated. 0 ammunition wasted. As she prepared to withdraw from her position, Maria allowed herself one final look through her scope. The SEALs were standing now, helping their wounded teammates toward the extraction point. They were alive. They would go home to their families. That was worth more than any recognition or medal. Thunder rolled across the battlefield one final time as Staff Sergeant Maria Santos disappeared into the storm, leaving only the echo of her Chaitak's voice and the grateful prayers of 12 American warriors who would never know her name. The extraction Blackhawks found SEAL Team Delta 40 minutes later, huddled in a defensive perimeter around their wounded. "What the hell happened down there?" the pilot asked over the aircraft's intercom as wounded SEALs were loaded onto stretchers. Commander Richards shook his head, snow dripping from his helmet. "Honestly, I don't know. Someone was watching over us." Chief Petty Officer Davis, his arm in a makeshift sling, looked back toward the mining complex. Counted at least 16 enemy Kias, all precision shots, all from long range. Whoever it was, they're a ghost. Back at the forward operating base, word spread quickly through informal channels that moved faster than official reports. The mess hall buzzed with whispered conversations about the mysterious sniper who'd saved Delta Team. Had to be Delta Force, speculated one Marine. Maybe CIA Special Activities Division. Negative, replied a Navy corpsman who'd treated the wounded. "I've seen Delta work. This was something else. This was supernatural." Richards faced an unusual problem while writing his after-action report. Military doctrine required identifying all personnel who'd participated in combat operations, but he couldn't identify someone who'd never revealed themselves. In a section marked additional assets, he simply wrote unknown, friendly sniper, exceptional marksmanship, decisive battlefield impact. His commanding officer read the report twice. "You're telling me an unidentified shooter eliminated 16 enemy combatants during your extraction?" "Yes, sir. Without that intervention, we'd have suffered complete casualties. And you have no idea who it was?" "None, sir." The CO stared at the report for a long moment. "I'll forward this up the chain. Someone somewhere knows who was in that sector, but nobody came forward." 3 decks below, in the logistics section, Staff Sergeant Maria Santos processed routine ammunition requests. Her computer screen showed standard inventory numbers: 408 Chaitak rounds, 556 mm cartridges, 50 caliber Barrett ammunition. She'd requisitioned 16 rounds of 408 Chaitak 3 days earlier. Her current inventory showed 16 rounds expended. The paperwork was perfectly clean. A young SEAL from Delta Team approached her supply window. It was Petty Officer Martinez, his left arm still bandaged, but healing well. "Excuse me, Staff Sergeant," he said quietly. "I wanted to thank you for the ammunition requisition last week. Quality was outstanding." Maria looked up from her paperwork. "Just doing my job, Petty Officer." Martinez studied her face carefully. Her dark eyes were calm, professional, unremarkable. She looked exactly like what she was, a logistics specialist managing inventory. But something made him linger at the window. "You hear about what happened to our team yesterday?" "I heard there was contact," Maria replied neutrally. "Glad everyone made it back. Someone out there saved our lives. Best shooting I've ever seen." Martinez paused. "Reminded me of stories my grandfather used to tell about guardian angels watching over soldiers." Maria returned to her paperwork. "I'm sure your training and teamwork got you through." After Martinez left, she allowed herself a small smile. The Chaitak was secured in the armory, properly cleaned and maintained. Her ghillie suit was stored with other field equipment. Her range cards were locked in her personal footlocker. But something had changed in how people looked at her. The mockery was gone. When she passed groups of operators, conversations paused respectfully. The nickname Sniper Girl was spoken with different inflection. Now, not derision, but something approaching reverence. Nobody could prove anything. But in the close-knit world of special operations, legends grew from whispered stories and unexplained coincidences. Late that evening, Commander Richards found a single playing card slipped under his door. The ace of spades with a handwritten note. "Glad you made it home." He turned the card over in his hand, studying the precise handwriting. Somewhere on this base was a warrior who'd saved his team's lives and asked for nothing in return. That kind of selfless courage deserved recognition, even if it had to remain anonymous. 6 months later, Advanced Marksmanship School added a new case study to their curriculum. Instructors called it the Phantom Mountain Engagement. 16 confirmed kills at extended range during adverse weather conditions by an unidentified sniper. Study the ballistics data, instructors told their students. Wind speed was gusting to 70 knots. Visibility was near zero. Snow was falling at blizzard intensity. Yet every shot was perfect. The case study became legendary among precision shooters. Students analyzed wind calculations, studied atmosphere pressure effects, and marveled at the technical execution displayed during those critical 40 minutes. But they never learned the shooter's name. Staff Sergeant Maria Santos continued her logistics duties with quiet efficiency. Her requisition forms were always accurate, her inventory counts perfectly balanced, her equipment maintenance exemplary. She'd been promoted to E6 and received a meritorious service medal for exceptional support during combat operations. The citation was deliberately vague. In her quarters, she'd added a small wooden box to her possessions. Inside were 16 spent 408 CHATAC casings, each one meticulously polished. They represented 16 lives saved, 16 American warriors who'd returned home to their families. That was her true medal. The CHATAC still leaned against her wall, maintained with obsessive care. Her notebook contained new entries, wind patterns from different seasons, atmospheric variations at different times of day, ballistics calculations for extreme range engagements. She was always preparing for the next time she might be needed. Young female recruits began requesting assignment to her unit. Word had spread through informal networks about the mysterious sniper who'd operated from a storm. Nobody could prove Staff Sergeant Santos was involved, but smart women noticed coincidences. How do you become invisible? A private asked during equipment inspection. Maria adjusted the young woman's rifle sling. You don't try to be seen. You focus on the mission. But what if nobody recognizes your contributions? Recognition isn't the mission. Getting your teammates home alive is the mission. The private nodded, filing that lesson away with all the others she was learning about quiet professionalism and selfless service. SEAL Team Delta rotated back to the United States, but they carried the story with them. In bars near Naval Special Warfare Command, they'd tell anyone who'd listen about the guardian angel who'd save their lives. Best shooting I've ever witnessed, Chief Davis would say. Whoever it was, they deserve the Medal of Honor. You think it was CIA? Someone would invariably ask. No idea, but I hope they're still out there watching over our people. The story evolved with each telling. Some versions included mysterious helicopters emerging from storm. Others described impossible shots through hurricane winds. The details might vary, but the core truth remained constant. When America's finest warriors needed help, help had appeared from the darkness. Commander Richards, now promoted to lieutenant commander, kept the Ace of Spades card in his wallet. Sometimes during particularly difficult briefings or challenging operations, he'd touch it for luck. It reminded him that heroes came in many forms, not all of them seeking recognition. 6 months after the incident, he received another playing card. This one was left on his desk after a classified briefing about upcoming operations. The Two of Spades with another handwritten note. Stay safe out there. He looked around the briefing room, studying faces of intelligence analysts and logistics personnel. Someone in this room was his guardian angel. Someone who continued watching, continued caring about the welfare of operators in harm's way. But he learned not to ask questions. Some heroes preferred the shadows. Staff Sergeant Maria Santos filed her weekly ammunition inventory report and prepared for another quiet evening of equipment maintenance. Through her window, she could see new SEAL teams training on the obstacle course, their voices carrying on the mountain air. Young warriors preparing for future battles, future dangers, future moments when they might need someone watching from a storm. She opened her notebook and began calculating ballistics tables for the upcoming winter season. The weather patterns were shifting, which meant her data needed updating. The next time American lives hung in the balance, she would be ready. After all, that was her true mission. Some say heroism announces itself with fanfare and medals. But the most profound acts of courage often happen in silence, witnessed only by those whose lives are saved and the guardian who asks for nothing in return. Staff Sergeant Maria Santos teaches us that strength isn't measured by recognition, but by the willingness to act when action matters most. In that storm-swept mountain valley, she became something more than a soldier. She became the invisible hand that guides warriors home. Her Chaytak M200 rifle spoke 16 times that night. Each shot was a life preserved, a family kept whole, a future protected. The SEAL team never learned her name, but they carried her courage in their hearts forever. True heroism doesn't seek the spotlight. It operates from the shadows, strikes with precision when needed most, then vanishes back into the darkness to await the next moment when good people need protection from evil. Maria stood at her window, watching the mountains where she'd made her stand. The snow had stopped falling, leaving the peaks gleaming white under starlight. Somewhere out there, other warriors were preparing for their own battles, their own moments of truth. And when that time came, when the radio crackled with desperate calls for help, they would find her ready. Not for glory, not for recognition, but for the simple truth that some things were worth fighting for in silence. The invisible guardian, the ghost in the storm, the angel who asked for nothing but gave everything when it mattered most. What did you think of that decisive shot from the storm? Rate it from 0 to 10 in the comments below. Where are you watching from? Let us know your location. Don't forget to subscribe to Hidden Military Stories so you never miss our next incredible tale of courage under fire. Until next time, stay strong, stay vigilant, and remember, heroes walk among us every day. The legend of the mountain ghost continued to grow in whispered conversations across military installations worldwide. Special operations personnel shared the story during training exercises, each version adding new details but maintaining the core truth. Someone had reached out from the darkness to save American lives, asking nothing in return except the knowledge that good men went home to their families. At Fort Bragg, instructors began referencing the Phantom Mountain engagement when teaching advanced marksmanship techniques. The ballistics calculations required for those shots became legendary among precision shooting communities. Students studied wind charts and atmospheric data, trying to understand how anyone could have achieved such accuracy under impossible conditions. The mystery only deepened their respect for the unknown marksman. Maria Santos continued her quiet service, processing requisitions and maintaining equipment with the same methodical precision she'd applied to eliminating 16 enemies. Her promotion to staff sergeant had come with additional responsibilities, but she carried them with the same understated competence that defined everything she did. Young soldiers looked up to her without knowing why, sensing something in her bearing that spoke of deeper experiences. During weapons inspections, she would occasionally pause beside a young sniper's rifle, offering subtle adjustments to scope settings or suggesting improvements to shooting positions. Her advice was always given quietly, without explanation of how she possessed such detailed knowledge. The soldiers accepted her guidance with growing respect, recognizing expertise even when its source remained mysterious. The Chaytak remained her constant companion, cleaned and maintained with religious devotion. She'd added new modifications over the months, subtle improvements that enhanced its already impressive capabilities. The rifle had become an extension of herself, a precision instrument calibrated to her specific requirements. When the next crisis came, and she knew it would come, she would be ready to answer the call from the shadows once again. Late one evening, as thunder rolled across the mountains and rain began to fall, Maria stood at her window, watching lightning illuminate the distant peaks. The storm reminded her of that night, when everything had changed, when she'd stepped out of the shadows to save lives that hung in the balance. Her reflection in the glass showed a woman who carried secrets that would never be told, victories that would never be celebrated, but purpose that would never fade. A knock at her door interrupted her thoughts. She opened it to find a young private, nervous but determined. "Staff Sergeant," the private began, her voice barely above a whisper. "I wanted to thank you for the marksmanship advice last week. My scores improved dramatically." Maria studied the young woman's face, seeing something of herself in those eager eyes. "Just remember what I told you. Precision saves lives. The mission always comes first. The private nodded solemnly, understanding that she was receiving more than technical instruction. She was being entrusted with a philosophy, a way of thinking about service that transcended personal recognition or advancement. After the private left, Maria returned to her equipment maintenance, the familiar ritual that kept her grounded and prepared. Her notebook lay open beside the Mayday, filled with updated calculations and atmospheric data. New weather patterns, seasonal wind shifts, elevation corrections for different operational areas. She was constantly learning, constantly improving, because she knew that somewhere in the future, another desperate radio call would crackle through the static. Another team of warriors would find themselves surrounded, outgunned, facing impossible odds. And when that moment came, they would need someone watching from high ground. Someone with steady hands and a calm heart. Someone willing to emerge from invisibility long enough to tip the scales, then disappear back into the shadows where true guardians belonged. Maria Santos closed her notebook and prepared for sleep, knowing that tomorrow would bring new challenges, new opportunities to serve, new chances to make a difference that no one would ever know about. The mountain ghost was ready. The invisible angel stood watch. And somewhere in the darkness, America's finest warriors could rest a little easier, knowing that when the storm came, they would not face it alone. The Mayday waited silently against the wall, patient and deadly, ready for the next time heroes needed saving by a guardian they would never see.